Welcome to the ATP Project. You're with your host, Matt, Steve, Jeff, and Elizma. G'day, how you going, guys?
Great.
Yeah, good.
Good, thank you.
What's going on?
We've missed you.
I've missed you too, Steve. I mean, there's not really much happening in the world at the moment. It's been a very slow news week.
Very
Yeah,
slow.
very.
No,
Obviously,
right,
and I appreciate people are getting fatigued. Tony's been scrolling through Instagram and just wanting to switch off because it's just horrific out there. There's a lot of bad stuff, and I appreciate there's a lot of fatigue. So, you know, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to give you a break from that, and we're going to talk about something else completely different.
Yeah.
a topic that's a bit more meaty, isn't it, really?
Oh, God, you suck with your
Steve.
Just trying to get a segue. Just trying to get a segue.
You're like my dad, Steve.
Probably same age, you know.
Could be.
No, I think you're a bit older.
Yeah, somebody's just actually looking at you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Dad?
so let's talk about the carnivore diet
Well-
and talk about the pros and cons of that and come out with some sort of a consensus of what the hell it is.
We were speaking about this a while ago, Matt. Every action has an opposite
Equal and
reaction.
opposite reaction.
That's
Consequences, yeah.
Well, you know, and this is the sort of
Newton's second
thing.
law.
Where you have anything, that's right, Newton's law. So the pendulum swings, too far, the other way. And well, I shouldn't say that because I mean I don't really know a great deal about the carnivore diet. It does sound pretty extreme. But I almost think some people are probably doing it as a bit of a protest against the vegans, despite what you may or may not feel. So, but what's the truth around this diet? I mean, how long has it been? I mean, I did hear about it many years ago. I mean, I've heard of obviously the vegan diet, vegetarian diet. You've got the fruit-based diet. You've got
Celery juice.
I mean, all sorts of weird diets sort of out there. And when I say weird, I mean from the norm.
Extremes.
Yeah, extremes.
extreme.
Yeah.
So the carnivore diet, where its histories, when did it start? Is it really popular now, or is it a fad on the rise? What's going on?
Well, the first recorded history, and I guess this is a long time ago, 2 million years ago. Yeah,
That's my
Homo
job
habilis
today.
was
Nice.
the first recorded history after
What was
that.
his name?
Homo habilis. And that was the first recorded carnivore diet during the Ice Age, about 2 million years ago. It was the first recorded one because there's no plants.
Bugger all
around.
plants growing during the Ice
About
Age.
2
Is
million
that-
years ago. Were you there, Steve?
Yeah, I was there. Well, you know how old I am.
Cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit cold during the Ice Age back then.
Your nipples would have straightened out.
Oh,
Normally they curl. They're like a little pig's tail. But then when it gets really cold, they go, poof.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Very, very.
Cut
And
glass
of course,
with them.
the last Ice Age was about in 1850. It was a mini Ice Age. So we've had them loads and loads and loads over the centuries and that.
What
sort
is
of
a
thing.
mini ice age? Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about 50 years, 100 years?
No, it's to do with the
Winter's coming
elliptical
for a season.
orbit of the Earth around the Sun.
Yeah.
So the Sun, we're at the moment going around the Sun pretty round. I'm trying to give directions on a podcast, but often we go elliptical.
I don't think
about
we're going to be able to change a direction. You don't give us directions to get around the sun.
It's called the Milankovitch a constant, where this guy discovered that the Earth doesn't move around the Sun directly circular. It goes sometimes like the shape of a football, if I'm trying to put it across on camera. So we move far away from the Sun sometimes, so we get massive ice ages.
No,
Where are we at the moment, Steve?
We're quite rounded around the thing. We're very low level of like the temperatures now are quite cool compared to our history of the Earth. Like the poles didn't exist and all this when it was warmer, and then you go through periods of glaciation. About
and it's
every
not like that,
5,000.
is it? Yeah, like the theory is that it's expanding. So it's kind of like it's
What's
almost like the
expanding?
planets are following the sun like a comet. Like if the sun's moving out, so we're not going just around the sun. It's actually as it's moving, we're kind of trailing.
We get sucked
around
away
it.
by Jupiter and Venus and the
That's
big heavy
right, eh?
planets.
Yeah, right.
They just pull us off orbit. That's what happens about every 100,000 years, significantally.
Yeah.
And every 400,000 years, we have major movements of the Earth. So that causes extreme climate change.
Ice ages. I remember in the Time magazine in the 70s when they were freaking out about the
Yeah,
ice age
ice
that was
ages.
going to happen 50 years, which would be around now.
Yeah.
They were freaking out. Whatever they did, man, it worked.
They were going to sprinkle ash over the poles to...
What?
They were going to sprinkle ash over the poles.
To make
because
it black.
Yeah, because the black absorbs the heat and the white reflects
wow.
it. So that's right. Or you could
Whatever.
sprinkle iron across the ocean to suck up all the CO2. That was the
Iron?
other theory, iron filings, because it stimulates bacterial growth.
Like iron.
Yeah, like iron.
Iron.
Iron,
Okay.
sorry.
Do you like Iron Man?
Oh, you missed the Iron podcast.
No, but I heard about it.
Oh, it was amazing. I am still walking every day. I walk up to Steve and go, and I say some statement and go, "Is that irony? Is that ironic?" And he goes, "Yes, that is." It's
That is.
I still don't understand it.
No, it's you have to be South African, but that's okay.
Anyway,
So in terms then,
what are we talking
if
about?
this is
Carnivores?
happening, we could be all going back to a carnivore diet if they kill off the photosynthesis and the plants will die, Steve.
Yes, the last...
I mean, forget about breathing, but I mean, we'd probably end up, eating meat because there'd be no
Absolutely,
plants.
and this happened about the last time a major event happened. Again, if you believe the history, is 65 million years ago with the KT comet that smashed into what's now known as Mexico, and everything just went into all the dinosaurs died and the mammals rose and all this sort of stuff.
That's why there's that big bloody hole in the Gulf of Mexico, hey? That big
That's
ledge.
it.
Yeah, wow.
There's evidence of a big strike there. That was our
Is that
probably.
where the Bermuda Triangle is?
Oh no, it's a bit further north.
Yeah.
Oh, why are we talking about this? Let's talk about eating animals. I just get so sidetracked with all the interesting stuff we can talk about. Yeah, I know.
I'll do a podcast on that if you want. I like that stuff.
Actually, Steve does remind me of
Neanderthal?
Mrs. Doubtfire. No,
Mrs. Doubtfire.
No, John reminds me of Mrs. Doubtfire, but Steve reminds me of the dinosaur guy. Remember, and he becomes the postman at the end, and he's like talking about Paleolithic. And do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. There was
Dorothy the
guy,
dinosaur?
No,
Yeah, with
was,
the old dude with the moustache.
yeah, it was my era.
He was a dinosaur freak. Anyway, Steve, keep going with your paleo
Tell us
paleo
about
diet.
Paleo diet?
No, not paleo. What are you doing?
No, not paleo. We'll talk about that another time. I mean, Metasaurus diet.
Metasaurus diet?
Yeah.
What happened to the dinosaurs? Do you want to go without that story?
Yeah.
All right. It was an interesting period 65 million years ago because photosynthesis was wiped out and all the dinosaurs were basically wiped out then. And our genes dramatically changed, our ancestry genes. Like the time we dropped our production to make vitamin C in 61 million years ago. So that's why we can't make vitamin C now. And that caused a lot of DNA instability in our genome, which means we can change our DNA quicker, which this is a theory that proposed us to become greater, more adaptable animals to different diets. And this brings us back to why some humans can eat one sort of diet and do fine, one can eat another sort of diet and do fine.
Yeah, right.
So it's a little
So
bit...
there's not one diet for all, Steve?
Well, I don't want to cut to the end of the conclusion, but basically,
why not?
that's why, as I said, we've read a book by Sean Baker, who's a doctor in America who wrote the Carnivore Cookbook, who's quite famous with this.
You said Simon Baker before the
I know, I said
podcast, and I went and
Simon
Googled
Baker.
that, and I'm sitting there going, hey, that's that Aussie, the mentalist.
Yes.
Oh, that was impressive.
Sean Baker, he's an orthopod, and basically he's written a book, and he's orthopod, like an orthopedic surgeon.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
I honestly thought he had like automatic legs. I'm sitting there thinking this guy's on autopilot. He's just, I'm an autopod.
And he's him and a number of other people. And again, there's no big studies on just eating meat, but these guys have been eating it for over 10 years, and they're doing quite okay.
Well,
What's the longest someone's done it for, though?
10 years.
And how many poos has he done in 10 years?
We spoke about this, Matt, before when we were on the plane talking about the guy that went into with the Inuits and was eating caribou and then and he had no plant as well too. And it always fascinated
No,
me.
but they did have some plant.
Did they?
Yeah, because they used to go down under when the tide
sea
went out.
cucumbers.
They'd go under and eat all those sea vegetables and all that sort of stuff, and pull out all the kelp. So they still had certain nutrients and certain fibre. And this is what's man, I had so many questions about this because, like, seriously, how do they get their shit together? Literally, without fibre, how are they pooping? I don't know how to get certain nutrients. I want to talk about what nutrients they're getting. And what they're not getting, and how I know someone might have done it for 10 years and that sort of stuff.
Well,
but
you hear about these weird diets and extreme diets where people eat like potatoes for a year, for example, and lose weight. I mean, I always look at that sort of stuff and go, wow, there's no balance. I mean, how can that in the long term be good for you? But the body's amazing ability to adapt. But Steve, what's the truth of this with this carnivore diet?
Well, you're right about eating vegetables, but that was only when the sea was thawed out.
Right.
Most where the Inuits live is above the Arctic Circle. In other words, the sea ice freezes over 10 months of the year. So, yes, they don't have exclusively carnivore diet, but they do for 10 months of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You do. One dude did it, wrote a book, did it for 10 years.
Yeah.
We've got these.
This guy in the 1920s.
No,
This
Simon
guy,
Baker dude.
2020 released a
Well,
book.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, and then what we've had like Jordan Peterson's daughter, I can't remember her name, but she's famous for this, isn't it? Yeah, and
was
so
gonna say Miss Peterson.
she's eaten a diet that's cured her autoimmune arthritis, which she had juvenile arthritis, which is a terrible arthritis you get as a kid, and that's all cleared up and everything.
But she got adult arthritis now by any chance?
But
That's right.
fine.
But Steve, we talk a lot about this as well too. I mean, obviously you had ankylosing spondylitis, but we talk about correlation is not the same as causation because you might be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So you might have gone into a carnivore diet and you've eliminated one thing out of your diet, grains or dairy. That may have been the cause, but you've removed everything. Now, because you've also removed that, you can't then say, oh, well, not eating vegetables is good for you.
I tend to agree with you there because it could be like if you go on a pure carnivore diet, you're obviously eliminating a lot of sugars and carbohydrates, and a lot of pathogenic bacteria and organisms feed off sugar, like your Candida, Klebsiella, which is linked to ankylosing spondylitis. So, your small intestinal bacterial dysbiosis. So by doing a diet like that, you are going to be eliminating a whole bunch of organisms that can cause inflammation and diseases and metabolic syndrome and stuff like that. So it does become hard to know, well, is it the diet or the calories or the whatever, the foods that you're eating, or is it the secondary effects from the gut that could potentially either be making you better or making you worse or what have you. So a lot of the times it's not the food itself, it's more the secondary effects that these foods
It's a great point, because if you throw the baby out the bathwater, if you're cutting out, let's say you're allergic to, I'll pick up something innocuous like capsicum, but you're going on a carnivore diet, but you're definitely not eating capsicums, and all of a sudden your health gets better because it's just the capsicum. You could be eating loads of broccoli and other green leafies, which could be extremely healthy for you. So it's really tricky to eliminate it down. That's why the science is very grey on this, because it would be considered unethical, I think, from a university point of view, to say, okay, stop eating fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds and legumes 100% for a year. I don't know if that'll pass an ethics board.
You know what you're saying before about the Inuits and that. Like, what we learn about the gut is that they can go 9 months and just be dormant and wait for 9 months for the carbs to come back, which is normally what would happen when fruit season or something disappears if you're in a snowy place, and you got there'd be big sections of the year where you wouldn't get any of those carbohydrates, fibre and that sort of stuff. But they can just wait. So maybe, there might be some people that are doing these things like 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, or maybe somewhere within 9 months they might be having a bit of a cheat meal or a load back up or something like that. It's just enough to keep that gut kind of working. Can you just someone answer my question? How do they poo?
All right.
I can't understand how you can possibly get your shit together without the fibre. We know of the dry matter of the stool, so if we forget about the water, the dry matter, we've got 10 to 20% of the dry matter of most people's poo is dead bugs. All right, that's going through. There's proteins and that sort of stuff, but there's 10 to 40% of that turd is fibre. And without that fibre, what are they pooing out?
Well, this guy poos about 1 to 2 times a week, and he says it's regular and soft and doesn't have a problem with it. And this is the guy the Sean Baker dude who's eating this lay for 10 years. So we're drawing on his experience a lot. Yeah. So it's one person's observation, but they just say they poo a hell of a lot less.
You were going to bring one in, weren't you, Steve? You were going to do this. To show you? You got your cat. Because we're talking about cats. You said, have you seen a cat poo? Yeah. I said, I try not to watch them, but I have seen one.
Yeah, well, cats are obligatory carnivores.
Just don't do eye contact. It's so weird.
Cats can live off meat alone, okay, because they make vitamin C. Yeah. All animals can, except for us and monkeys and guinea pigs and fruit bats, weirdly. Oh. So cats can eat just, because if you think about a cat in the wild, they don't eat vegetables. They may eat the contents of, like if they kill a rat, and they'll swallow the whole rat. Small cats
so
or
their guts as well. They're getting the fibre out of someone else's poo?
Yeah.
Okay, but this dude's obviously not. So what is he eating? What is it, Sean?
Yeah, Sean. He gave us a specific diet of what he eats, and basically, here it is. It's basically for meal 1, eggs and bacon, New York strip for lunch, and homemade jerky for a snack. He has 2 meals a day. 1 meal of salmon and then ribeye, and then hard-boiled eggs as snacks.
So you can have eggs?
Yeah.
Can you have milk?
No, he said if you don't, he said go off milk, but you can have cheese if it helps you get onto this diet if you want, if you're not allergic to it. But he basically says you don't need to. Another meal he has is brisket, liver and cheese. There you go, there's a bit of cheese. Sardines and burger patties, pork shoulder and leftover steak.
Wow. And how old was this dude when he started this? How long did he do it for?
It's been 10 years and he's about my age, so he's early 50s.
Are they allowed to drink beer and stuff?
No, when he first started.
I want to talk about alcohol at some point.
Well, and also fruit from the vine, which, Jesus approves of. So how do you get away with not having any alcohol whatsoever?
Well, I do. I don't drink alcohol. But
no. What do these people drink on a carnivore diet? They only allowed to drink
water or carbonated water was the only 2 things.
Collagen, protein.
But they can have herbal teas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they can have herbal teas?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
This guy doesn't. He only drinks water or carbonated water when he goes crazy.
And what happened to him, Steve?
Loony.
When he started off, what did he look like? Was he healthy?
He was terribly unhealthy when he started this, and that's what happens with most people. You're motivated to change. If you're not, you don't. And this guy, was a power lifter and all this sort of stuff. And he changed his diet dramatically because he started getting arthritis in his joints.
Yeah, wow.
And so he was forced, he decided to change, and he eventually went carnivore, and then he'd have a break from it, and he'd get sick again, and his digestion would play up. So he goes, and eventually he didn't want to have any cheat meals because he just felt sick. I mean, now he just eats 100% carnivore.
Wow. Okay, and what happened to him?
He's still kicking along strong now, practicing
medicine. Weight, bloods. I mean, have we got any information on his...
Everything improved dramatically. Like his blood... Like, I'll give you a study that sort of elaborated. This is a high meat, low carbohydrate study where they actually tested this, where they said, well, what happens if you have a lot of meat and very low carbohydrate?
So what's their very low carbs? And does it have fibre? Their
very low carbs was less than 10%. So there was some fibre in it. So there wasn't, they probably had to. And basically it found that their weight loss improved dramatically, their triglycerides went down, which are fats in the blood, cholesterol levels didn't change despite eating loads of cholesterol. Remember, only your cholesterol's not important.
Look, and again, there's a whole misinformation campaign around fats, cholesterols, and we've already sort of mentioned that in the podcast as well too. Obviously, the big thing there, as far as nutrition is concerned, zero sugar, which has got to be good for you, correct?
Well,
is there any sugar in meat?
No.
Well,
sugar
you can make it.
What about glycogen? We hold our glycogen in our meat. Do we kind of... So you make it from the protein. Is there any measurable amounts of stored glycogen in the meat that we eat?
That's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Well, that is actually an interesting question. So to get back to sugar, okay, so there's absolutely no glucose in a piece of steak, right? And you have to maintain blood sugar levels. That's how you keep alive. Your brain uses a certain amount of glucose. Your brain can survive on both glucose and ketones.
Yeah, and ketones,
right?
yeah.
So it'll just depend whether you're in ketosis or not. Now, because there's no sugar, and also, it just means that your body has to make sugar if you're just on a pure carnivore diet. So you'll eat protein, it'll get digested into your amino acids. Those amino acids will insert into the mitochondrial Krebs cycle at different points of time. So it'll keep that mitochondrial cycle going. But then the body will have to take some of those amino acids and turn it into glucose. So it'll take some of those amino acids, specifically from the between malate and oxaloacetate. It'll go through gluconeogenesis. It's like it goes out of the mitochondria. These amino acids, they go through the PEP pathway, which are phosphophenol pyruvate pathway.
Of course.
And that's of course. And then that's how you make glucose, right? So that's how the body will maintain glucose constantly. So you can do it through a carnivore diet where you can maintain that blood glucose. Now, through that process. There is a process called glucogenesis, which is, glycogenesis, where you make glycogen, right? So this is like creating glycogen that can be stored in the liver and the muscles. So you can do that as well through this process. You can actually make glycogen as well if you're eating an adequate amount of protein. So this will kind of depend on how much protein you eat, So we're not talking about some people might do a carnivore diet, but also semi-starve themselves as well, right?
Sure.
Then you're going to have you're not going to make the glycogen, and you may also break down muscle as well if the protein content is not enough. But if you're eating like what Sean is eating, like a real lot of protein, you're not going to be breaking down muscle. You can turn some of that into glucose, and you can turn some of that into glycogen as well through glyconeogenesis. The thing though is if you're on a high protein diet like this long term, you will become insulin resistant. It's it's a protective mechanism.
Tell us more about that.
Right, so in the, back in the Ice Age, when they were just eating meat, they were actually very insulin resistant. And the reason, there's actually a very good evolutionary reason for that. Because there's so little glucose, you don't want insulin to be stimulated to take that little bit of glucose and put it into the cell. So the peripheral tissues become insulin resistant. So you that's just kind of like a long-term mechanism. It's also kind of what
about liver? Do you know if the liver becomes insulin resistant or extra insulin sensitive?
I don't know if the liver. I think the liver, probably because that's kind of like where a lot of these processes occur, does become insulin resistant. And one of the reasons is to preserve glucose, because it was a way for babies to survive in those days, right? Because when a woman fell pregnant, First of all, her blood sugar levels drop very quickly in the beginning of pregnancy, and the baby needs glucose. So by being insulin resistant on a diet where you can only eat proteins was a way of getting glucose to the baby, so the babies will be heavier weight, healthier, and they survive. So that was a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
But now look at your tribes, like, we can look at the Australian Aborigines, a lot of the Islander people, like even the Nauruans, their traditional diets were quite heavily protein-based and, let's say, also plant-based, like low GI type of carbohydrates, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as they kind of went onto the Western diet where they were not used to it,
Boom.
they started getting all of these type 2 diabetic issues and stuff like that. It's because their genes is still in that kind of the old genes, and they've never had time to adapt. We as Westerners have adapted over time, so we don't get as insulin resistant. But that's kind of like a lot of these diets kind of make you insulin resistant, but it's a protective mechanism. Now that brings us to the alcohol bit, right?
Yeah.
Because I know how people are. We think, oh yeah, I'm going to do the carnivore diet, I'm going to eat steak, I'm going to lose lots of weight, but I'm going to have a beer with my steak or something like that. Because we don't think of what we drink, we
Big
just
difference
think...
between beer and wine, though. I'll just put that in.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to just say all alcohol
Okay.
here,
Well,
right?
I'll fight you on that.
Yeah.
To the death.
but
And I'll put money on Elizma.
Yeah, I probably would too. Yep.
I'll explain how
She's
it
fit.
works,
She is fit.
It's just that we don't think of what we drink, we only think of what we eat, right? But now if you're insulin resistant because you're only eating meat for a long period of time, as soon as you have any kind of alcohol, because alcohol pretty much, it does not have to be digested, it absorbs straight into the bloodstream as sugar, as glucose, right? That's going to trigger like a massive insulin release, right? Because your body's like, oh my God, what is this? I'm not used to sugar, but you're insulin resistant. So if you do that for a long period of time, you will put on weight. You will put on a lot of weight because the diet's made you insulin resistant, which is not a problem as long as you don't eat sugar and refined carbohydrates. But if you do, and you do that on a regular basis, you will put on a lot of weight. So
But
there's
you got
pros
to
and
ease
cons.
it in. So if you have been on a carnivore diet and you want to kind of get
you're gonna
off
have
it, you
to
almost got
ease
to
it
do like
in.
a reverse diet style where you'll basically just add little bits and pieces until you become sensitive to it.
Yeah.
What about, because I was curious about morning fasting blood glucose then, because I mean the whole reason why they measure the fasting blood glucose is not to actually see what happens from your last meal, but to actually work out how good your liver is at measuring how much sugar's in your blood and if it's capable of pumping that glycogen out or if it's just pumping out too much.
Yeah. So that's the liver glycogen store. So when you sleep, your body will kind of start to, when you sleep, pretty much your body takes glycogen from the liver and starts turning that into glucose. So I think that's what you're kind of measuring in the morning when you take like a glucose sample. It's more that glycogen that you've kind of like converted into glucose.
So if they weren't capable of building glycogen in the liver and the muscle from eating a carnivore diet, that'd be no blood sugar in the morning. It'd be dead.
Zero.
Or in a coma.
Probably be very low. And
But
then
the body would be burning ketones.
Yes, and then what could either you'll be burning ketones or you could be pumping out cortisol to stimulate that gluconeogenesis.
To destroy muscle tissue.
To destroy muscle tissue.
Which
and
is-
that cortisol can then interrupt sleep, it can wake you up.
It's a stress,
And
it's a
again,
stress
Matt,
one.
this is where we were talking a while ago about fasted cardio, and the way to obviously optimize fat burning was to use oils, butter, something like first thing in the morning to get the oral cavity to tell the body, okay, fat is the energy source. Without providing the ketones, which a lot of people have done, and this is, I know this gets tricky, but I think we worked it out in terms of how to obviously maximize fat burning and preserve muscle tissue, which was what we were talking about, as opposed to using branch chains, because we know that leucine specifically is very easy to convert into through glyconeogenesis, correct? It's almost like the sacrificial lamb. The first thing that the body will go for, is that correct? I mean,
and alanine is the other one.
And the alanine. Okay.
Yeah.
Alanine's really important for the release of the muscle, the glycogen and keeping a steady blood sugar.
Leucine, I thought was the ketogenic amino acid,
It
right?
can be, yeah.
Yeah, because leucine kind of like, I just had a bit of a look at one of the graphs I drew a couple of years ago, because leucine goes into acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA can either go into the mitochondrial Krebs cycle or it can go into ketogenesis.
Yeah, that's right.
That'll
So
just
it's
depend on
situational
other
dependence.
things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And
situational
that's
dependent.
why you can eat zero carbohydrates, still have a healthy blood glucose level. Because it's situational. And just to answer your question about the insulin resistance, that's an extremely important question, because if you're insulin resistant at the liver site, you'll wake up with a high blood glucose level. And people go, I haven't eaten all night. And it's like your liver's been resistant, so it thinks you're starving of glucose. So it makes loads during the night, breaks down muscle tissue. They call that type 2 diabetes. And metformin treats it.
And with the fatty livers and things. So what you get the fat in the liver, the antennas don't work. And your liver's getting, 7 litres of blood every hour. So it's a good way of screening what's in your blood. And if the antennas that are supposed to be catching the sugar aren't bloody working, then a message goes through to the body saying, you've got no sugar, make some, release some. That's my layman's analogy.
It's a perfect analogy. It's called glucose 2 transporters, if you want to know what the antennas
that's what I was going to say that, but not in my layman's
Glucose in the muscle.
tone.
Yeah, right. And I find this fascinating because the best results that I ever got as far as getting into shape was concerned was following a ketogenic diet. Now, again, I appreciate that ketogenic diets are incredibly popular for some people in terms of their brain function. Some people, like Tony, cannot do it. Brain fog that just never seems to end. She is not geared for it. Now, whether that's her microbiome, I'm not sure, right? And this is why we say not one size fits all. I go into ketogenic diet and I get like ridiculously awesomely ripped.
It may be to do with the insulin.
Did you want to ask Brooker to cut that out to protect your own reputation?
I think it's sad that we all laugh.
Can I just say that, but honestly, without any word of a lie, like the ladies love it. I'm just fascinated, obviously, through manipulation of the microbiome and the effect that it has through diet. Exercise, obviously, is another way to increase akkermansia as well too. Especially anything that you would have had heaps of it, because obviously when you were running, you get that burning. Carbon
feeds on carbon in the mucus.
And obviously, so that's the benefit of obviously doing long distance anaerobic style of exercise.
You were talking about mitochondria and the high protein diet and mitochondria. What does it do to the muscle tissue and the cellular structure? Do they get lots of really high mitochondrial density like you see in the people that do the fat loaded diets with no carbs? Does it change your musle structure? Because I know...
dry hardness.
You get a lot of that dry, hard...
stringy looks. I mean, we had friends of ours that used to compete, and they didn't like it because they'd get lean, but they would look very sinewy, and they would lose the volume in their muscle.
Lots of collagen, lots of fascia, lots of mitochondria, but also not high levels of glycogen that holds all the water. So the muscles will go leaner, wiry, strong, good endurance, good strength. I mean, we know normally collagen's 10% of a muscle, 6 to 10% of a muscle mass, but generates about 30% of the power. We also know there's lots of new data coming. I'll let you. I know you're dying. There's a lot of data coming out of Germany and that sort of stuff regarding endurance, also with collagen and relating back to mitochondrial density, fascia, sarcomeres, and all that sort of stuff. So, what does a protein do to this energy pathways within muscle tissue?
So we're talking about mitochondrial biomass and cellular biomass. So the key metabolite within the Krebs cycle in the mitochondria that actually determines that biomass is citrate or citric acid. So because amino acids, they do fit in. I mean, I've got a picture here, which you can always take a photo of. And I know it's not color. I'm sorry, I don't have a color photocopy.
Put a link of it up on the site.
So this is a graph that I drew about in 2017, and you can see that there's like all the amino acids kind of like go into this circle is like the Krebs cycle, and you have amino acids going in various spaces, which means our body can actually use protein, break it down into amino acids, and keep this energy cycle going, which is great.
Where do citrates come from? Do we have to eat citrus fruit to get citrates?
Well, you will get citric acid from certain fruits, like lemons is very high in citric acid, for instance.
If I'm a carnivore, if I'm just carnivore, where am I getting my citrates from? Do I have to drink fruit?
Well, you'll get it from this Krebs cycle, right? Because as the amino acids
go in... So if I eat that Krebs cycle... If I eat that Krebs cycle... No, not the paper. I'm talking about inside the muscles, in the mito... As I'm eating the meat, I'm eating all of that stuff.
Well, you're creating all of this stuff. Because imagine the Krebs cycle is this little wheel. It just spins. You have to put energy or energy sources into this cycle to keep it spinning. So in the average person, it's glucose, it's sugar that goes in there. Now, if you're following a carnivore diet, you're not going to get glucose, you're only going to get proteins. So the proteins can also get into this spinning wheel. It's a bit like a hamster wheel, but it'll go in different kind of spaces.
Yeah.
But as soon as something is in that wheel, it'll keep spinning. So it'll keep making all kinds of metabolites.
Oh, wow.
And one of these things is citrate. So you can make citric acid from amino acids.
Yeah.
The key though here is
Citrate.
Yeah.
From
The key
acetyl-CoA.
here is if you are not eating enough protein. So let's say you're doing a carnivore diet, but you're also kind of semi-starving yourself because you want to accelerate weight loss or whatever. Your body's going to use a lot of those proteins to kind of make glucose, right? So the more glucose your body has to make because the blood sugar levels drop, and also from stress. Because remember, when you're stressed, you're also going to use more sugar, so you're going to go through that gluconeogenesis. So the more protein you take out of this spinning hamster wheel, the less it's going to be to make that citric acid. So that's when you lose the volume, because taking all those amino acids and turning them into sugar. So it really depends on the amount of protein and also the amount of stress you have in your life. So this is I think why different people have different results with different diets.
Yeah.
Because you can follow carnivore diet, but let's say you're highly stressed, or you're stressed, whether it's physical stress, mental stress, or what have you, you're going to take most of those amino acids and just turn it into sugar. If you don't have a lot of stress, you're going to take most of those amino acids and use it in muscle building or muscle preservation and things like that. So diets are not always as simple as I'm following this diet, so this is going to happen for me. It really depends on a lot of other factors as well. Because let's put the stress in there. So now you're taking all this beautiful meat that you're eating and you're turning it into glucose. You're also going to be inactivating your thyroid hormone. That in itself will then slow down cellular metabolism. And then you may still not get the weight loss that you want, even though you're following the carnivore diet and I'm supposed to lose all this weight, and why I'm not losing this weight.
So the thyroid slows down because...
Low calories. So calorie deficit is the main reason for a sluggish thyroid,
Yeah,
isn't it?
or the high cortisol. So the cortisol turns your active thyroid hormone, the T3, into reverse T3 or inactive T3.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then you don't have that active T3 to stimulate cellular metabolism. Because T3 makes all your cells work. It makes the mitochondrial cycle work. And I think on that topic, that one of the things I want to emphasize as well is because amino acids have to fit into this this Krebs cycle in the mitochondria, it means your mitochondria has to be healthy as well, right? So if you have very unhealthy mitochondria and you're insulin resistant and you're stressed, you're probably not going to get the great results from something like a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet that others may experience.
Yeah.
No, and that's got nothing to do with the diet. It's because your mitochondria doesn't know what to do with this fuel. It means that the cortisol is kind of sabotaging what happens to the fuel.
Yep.
And the insulin resistance is just going to make it really not just that much harder, or your body's going to be more sensitive to little carbohydrates, like having a beer or having a wine or having just a little bit of whatever, So some people are like that. Like they'll say, I have to follow this 100%. If I just go a little bit off, I blow up. And that's sometimes to do with this insulin resistance.
But
and
then this is where I think the future of theranostics is the way to go, because you can actually look at what you're doing, and again, we do it through our clinic as well too, where you can actually individualize the goals based on where you're sitting. In terms of, I know that you worked with Tony, my wife, and there were some things that we discovered, obviously, about her whole makeup that we needed to address first before she could obviously get the
She's
results.
messed up, isn't she?
Yeah, man, she's crazy. Oh, sorry, cut that. But yeah, obviously everybody's dealing. I'm serious. I'm joking about that. But yeah, I think obviously there's everything that people are dealing with, and that's going to knock them off, whatever pathway. Sorry, you're going to say something, man.
Yeah, I forgot what it was. I was sort of thinking about how messed up your wife is.
Yeah.
But can't remember what the fuck I was going to say.
That's right.
Oh no, what I was going to say is, interestingly, when the thyroid slows down, and this is it's really annoying because there's a big vicious cycle that forms, because thyroid's involved in every cell of the body. So you might be trying to burn fat, or you might be trying to do something, your calories are low. The thyroid then goes, well, I'm going to slow down your metabolism, because energy out in this instance is going to be regulated by your energy in. So I'm going to pull back on how much you're burning. One of the signs of a low thyroid is low stomach acid. So you get that hypochlorhydria, you get that really poor digestion, which means as you're eating all this meat, it's going to sit there and it's going to make you feel lousy and it's going to clog you up. And you're going to get very bloated.
Well.
Yeah. Then you're going to get the putrefaction of the protein, which creates a whole heap of other wastes. One of the other things I was really curious about when we're talking about mitochondria and the quality and the integrity of the mitochondria, correct me if I'm wrong with all this sort of stuff, but in the mitochondria, like the way I imagine it is like an oily little parcel with folds and folds of oil. And in amongst that is all of this activity going on with creating energy. But as you're saying before, things come in and out of the cytoplasm. One of the negatives, and as a naturopath, it's really hard to unlearn a lot of the stuff that we were taught. I don't know why we were taught half of the crap, really. But remember when we used to do the elimination diets and someone comes in with autoimmunity and you go, oh, you're possibly quite acidic and obviously we need to clean your body up. We want to get rid of things like arachidonic acids and everything like that. So one of the first things that would happen in naturopath training was to take them off the meat and put them on this alkalizing diet with good anti-inflammatory oils, avoiding things like arachidonic acid and avoiding that. So I always imagine that to protect the mitochondria, I want to reduce the amount of acidity that's made in the cytoplasm and replenish those oils regularly. We're definitely going to get the oil replenishment from the meat because that's going to be full of exactly the same oil that you're trying to rebuild it with. How do we get antioxidants to protect those oily structures? And is it acidic? And does that acid deteriorate the bone? And does it deteriorate the muscle? Come.
Do you want me to answer that? Okay. Well, firstly, from a nutrient point of view, they have broken down what's in meats and that sort of thing. And probably the big questionable one there with regards to nutrients is vitamin C.
Yeah.
And so vitamin C, if you eat livers, is fine. Because
if you eat liver, is there vitamin C in liver?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, loads of it.
Yeah.
About 20 milligrams, depending on the animal you eat, but about 20 milligrams per 100 grams. So if you add a 300 gram...
Everyone compares it to an orange. You better have compared it to an orange.
Yeah, an orange has 20 milligrams.
Oh, there you go.
So 100 grams of a liver is an orange.
And Matt, what's your recommendation of the optimal level of vitamin
C?
About
120 sort of milligrams is about where we saturate our immune cells.
Now, there is what we do know. In 2016, there was a discovery where they found that vitamin C levels for people eating this style diet doesn't need to be anywhere near as high as it was because you've got to remember that the vitamin C and glucose are very similar molecules. Okay, they're very, very similar. In fact, all animals make vitamin C from glucose. We don't.
Aren't they lucky?
I know.
Well,
Imagine if I could eat sugar to make vitamin C instead of... I mean, I kind of like the vitamin C foods, but as a kid, it would have been awesome.
Oh, anyway, this thing called L-glucolactone dehydrogenase, right, which is the enzyme that makes vitamin C.
It's the same name as his dog.
It's a simple step from glucose. So if you're not eating glucose, then glucose competes with vitamin C for absorption.
Oh.
So you need vastly less. And this was only discovered in 2016. So you need vastly less amounts of vitamin C to stop the competitive inhibition.
Is that right?
Yeah, they even come up with a term with it in the papers.
So glucose competes with vitamin C?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does alcohol?
I'm going to come back to
destroys
alcohol.
It's called the GGA, which is a glucose ascorbate antagonism. It's a GGA theory.
No, the GGA.
The GGA theory, I never heard of it till about.
And it's interesting because the HbA1c, which is the long-term, which is the long-term like glucose marker on red blood cells. One of the, and that's to show like just how much sugar damages the red blood cells. And the treatment for that is often high doses of vitamin C, right, to compete with that glucose.
Competes for the glucose because they're very similar. Even my cat can make vitamin C. But from a point of view, low vitamin C in us makes our genome more unstable.
Yeah.
So that's usually a bad thing, and it can be a bad thing, but it can be a good thing if you want your genome to change.
For adaptation,
I've got to clarify one other thing because it is a question I've been asked a few times. Because we always talk about how vitamin C is really important for collagen production. A lot of people are under the assumption that collagen is full of vitamin C. It's not. So what actually happens with that, it's a process of proline gets hydroxylated by vitamin C. So vitamin C is used up in the process of making the collagen. So it's not actually in the finished product. Yeah. So just don't do that.
So one of the things I kind of like, because you talked about acidity and alkalizing and stuff like that, Matt. So when you eat like a purely carnivore diet, because it changes like how your biochemistry works, like that whole gluconeogenesis, aspect and all of that. The enzymes that kind of like gets activated through all of those processes, like your pyruvate carboxylase and your that PEP, the phosphoenolpyruvate pathway, they use up a lot of magnesium. So you actually have to use a lot of magnesium to take those amino acids and turn it into glucose for all these other aspects. Now, I don't know how much magnesium is in meat, but that could be something that you have to kind of aware of.
How much, Steve?
There was, depending on which...
knows?
Yeah, it depends on how you eat the carnivore diet, but if you eat like the bone broths or all that sort of stuff, you get loads of it.
Of
Bone broth.
magnesium.
Oh, bone broth.
Yeah, and edible bones. They talk about eating salmon bones and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. My father used to love sardines on toast.
Yeah,
I hate that. Hey, Mum, some of my mum had
there's
horrible
lots of
tins of sardines with those bloody bones in them.
But
Chalky
but
stuff.
in terms though, obviously a lot of the traditional stuff, because my dad was 10 years past now, and he was 87 when he passed away. So obviously a lot of the stuff was relatively common back then. But nose to tail, the offal. I mean, half my family's Scottish, as well too.
So you
it's
love
like
spotted dick, don't you?
No, I love haggis. But yeah, I think in terms of
So haggis
that's
is
the sort of
inside-out
thing that
animal.
we don't eat anymore. We don't eat it at all. And again, if you go down now and you ask 100 kids at school, how many of you regularly eat sardines, or
they
any
don't.
kind of fish,
Yeah.
as you say, with the soft bones that you can eat, I guarantee you that there wouldn't be 1 in 100
No.
that
No.
eat it on any form of regular basis.
No.
In the old days, you didn't have a choice.
No.
You just sat down, ate, shut up, or you get the strap. And even before that, you were just either that or you're starved.
Yeah.
So nowadays, it's like, no, I don't want that. I'm going to Macca's, and you push the table back and bugger off. But this is only recent stuff. It's funny, like we talk about vegans and we talk about carnivore diets. The one diet that's found to be really bad in all the medical literature is the diet we're eating now, the Western diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the sad diet. Isn't it?
That's why when
Standard
people
American, standard Australian diet.
Yeah, and when people deviate from the known bad diet, it usually lands on a better diet, whether it be a vegan, carnivore, vegetarian, or whatever sort of diet. It's usually better than the one they're on. So that's why they find benefit.
Yeah, because they're pretty much cutting out all junk food, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah.
So whether it's
Yeah.
paleo or ketogenic, how much do the foods that they're eating have an impact on their weight loss, or is it just the fact that they're not eating all the other junk?
And refined sugars obviously is a big one as well too. I mean, Matt, I know you're talking about high fructose corn syrup being one of the modern day evils that we really need to try and eliminate as much as we possibly can out of our diet. Natural sugars in moderation, especially in their less refined forms, and
With all the fibre
The
and
low
the
GI
modbiotics
forms.
and everything with it.
are actually okay. The funny thing is that, but I mean, I've certainly found a lot of people that just have gone on a zero sugar. So in other words, they remove as much sugar out of their diet as possible, and the benefits that they get from it are substantial.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be sugars and fruits that they eat and all the rest of it, but I'm talking about refined white high fructose corn syrup and refined sugars. They won't eat anything with it in it, and just the health benefits just from doing that one act alone is significant. So
That uric acid and gout. I mean, normally someone goes, I get gout, you eat too much meat.
No,
and that sort of stuff.
that's actually
But-
carbohydrates.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
carbohydrates.
exactly.
Yeah.
I have noticed in all my experience in clinic, taking
this is
people off
interesting.
refined
It's not the red
sugars,
meat in the wine,
getting someone off fruit juice and stuff
carbs.
was better for gout than
it's
anything.
very similar to cholesterol, isn't it? So this
similar.
whole myth. I mean, because a friend of mine
Because the
suffers
liver
from
can
gout.
make urates in response to sugar.
And he'd go to his doctor and said, mate, you have to reduce meat. He's now gone on to a ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And so far, I have not seen him complain.
Rebel.
once.
Yeah, get rid of the sugar and the gout disappears.
Do you
Even
wanna-
those reactive arthritis, an autoimmune
Well,
condition.
Steve, you can talk from experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I talk about arthritis. The interesting one about the gout is because animal protein has purine. And purine can be metabolism to uric acid. Therefore, purines are bad. Therefore, but it doesn't work like that in the human body. Xanthine oxidase, the enzyme is required, is insulin dependent. So as long as you're not having insulin in your diet from all the sugars, you don't get the uric acid production. And secondly, uric acid is not bad. It's actually good antioxidant, protects against a lot of cancers. You want some of it. So it's not all bad. But now, from the arthritis point of view, we know that this benefits that. So we have to give them that. And that's because it downregulates T-helper-17 in the gut. If you get rid of all these plant foods, go on a ketogenic diet, T-helper-17 levels plummet.
Why? Is it because of all the commensal bugs die off because there's nothing to feed them? And
The bugs,
the load of lipopolysaccharide from your microbiome. So
Which is
lipopolysaccharide
massively
extremely inflammatory, and
yeah.
you can add lipopolysaccharide to any tissue, make it inflamed, but also aggravate stress and inflammatory and immune reactions just by exposure of lipopolysaccharide. And all it is a fragment of the bacterial cell wall. Don't care if it's good or bad bacteria, they got the same lipopolysaccharide. So just having a lower commensal load. So again, one of the things that we've learned with microbiome is we went through that probiotic era where all of us were deficient in those same 5 bugs that we all need to supplement with. Now, a lot of the data coming out about SIBO, IBS, autoimmune, all of these things is an overgrowth of bugs or an overgrowth of a commensal or an imbalance that leads to an overgrowth of something.
Absolutely.
So again, starving off the bugs of sugars reduces the inflammatory triggers and immune triggers.
Exactly, and remember, T alpha 17 is the immune system that protects the gut. Okay, so that sits at the gut wall. So if that goes up, remember these drugs now that knock
What if
out,
you have salty meat?
It's fine too because salt increases T alpha 17 correctly, which is why why have you ever tasted your snot and you get salty taste in your
All the
snot?
time.
Your snot in particular.
That's because
Try and stop me, Steve.
Your body secretes sodium to increase interleukin 17, T alpha 17.
All I
to
think
go
of
up.
Must try reach there.
Look, goblins and nature's bounty. That's the way I look at it. It's like a little meal that you didn't even prepare. It's just
Seasoned meal too.
Seasoned meal.
salt.
Because
High sodium.
it pumps out sodium to increase interleukin 17.
You don't want to get a cramp. You're running.
Oh, someone else's.
Yeah, well, if you have to.
mate.
Better than getting a cramp.
But you do want to increase T alpha 17 when you've got an infection in your respiratory system because that's what kills it.
Salty.
Yeah, and that's why you secrete a lot of sodium into the mucus tract to boost T alpha 17. And in the gut, the bugs, like Klebsiella, boost T alpha 17 more. So as long as you can get rid of those, which is getting rid of carbohydrates, T alpha 17 levels drop, and then you can have salt.
See, this is the funny thing I say about my life in general is that everything that you hear effectively flip it 180 degrees, and that's probably close to the truth.
Depends where you hear it.
In the 90s and even 2000s, even today, you still hear people promoting a high flour-based diet, which is catastrophic for the gut.
Well, they call them staple foods. Remember, they go through a list of what's the staple food in each of the different country diets, and they'll go, so the staple food in Australia is, lucky we can't eat coal. That would definitely be the bottom of the
Uranium would be pretty bad too.
Yeah, it'd be all black from the coal.
I find it funny that they call them staple foods or they call them food groups. Who decided they were food groups? Who decided flour was a food group?
Yeah.
Who decided sugar was
Obviously
a food group?
not you, Steve, and it's not even essential. I mean,
No.
look, it's all
Have
in
you ever
there.
have you heard of essential fatty acid? You've heard of essential proteins. You said to me, you haven't heard of essential carbohydrates, have you?
No, I haven't
none.
actually.
There is none.
Oh.
That's why you can have a carnivore diet and live.
All right, well, talking about something that's essential, getting back on track, alcohol. So when you're talking about the ketogenic
I knew you were
diet,
gonna go
well,
there.
I have to come back.
Yes.
Again,
I'm coming
when
to
I
this
was going
next.
keto, no beer, because obviously that contained carbohydrates.
But beer is fine on the carnivore diet.
No, not that kind of beer.
Are you talking about like beer?
Beer.
You say it like that. Okay. How do you shear a sheep? You share it, don't you?
No.
You don't share it.
No.
Not with anyone.
No. So, beer.
Talking about eating the sheep.
Beer.
I don't drink beer.
Yes.
But
just
Good
licks
for
them.
you.
Red
Licks them
wine.
as they run past.
Especially if I can get to their nasal canal for that salty
Berries.
magic nose goblin. But in terms of red wine, though, that wouldn't knock me out of ketosis because my understanding is that there's no sugar in the red wine, that my body would preferentially burn the alcohol as ketones.
Those calories. It burn the calories.
They'll burn it as calories.
Uh-huh.
So
But will it take me out of ketosis?
It can, yes. So it depends on how much. Like I know
Heaps.
many years ago, one of my best friends, Alessandro Ferretti, he's like a genius on ketogenesis and stuff like that. And I think he said to me, like, it depends on each person. It depends on your level of insulin resistance. So some people can get away with, let's say, half a beer or one glass of red wine, and they can still be in ketosis, but anything more will kick them out.
Right.
But that level will kind of change from person to person. Now, alcohol itself, like I said, doesn't have to get digested, it gets into the bloodstream straight away. Now let's just forget about that, because I know you get low carb beers and all of this, and certain alcohols will have lower carbohydrates, like I think vodka is very low carbohydrate.
Red wine has none.
Yeah, red wine is if you say none, then I'll take your word on that, because I didn't research that. But
yes.
yeah, so there'll be
Big Head beer's got no carbs, but it's lots. It's like.
But it's not about the carbs. I guess that's
About
what I'm going to
alcohol.
say.
7
right?
calories per mil.
Alcohol,
Yeah.
if you go right back down to basic, like redox signaling and basic biochemistry, alcohol contains a crap load of NADH. Now, NADH is also what you get from eating lots of carbs and sugars and stuff. It's energy. So NADH is energy molecules. It's not a bad
good for you,
thing.
yeah.
It's energy. Your body
That's a
will
bloody
burn
expensive
that.
supplement. Wine is actually good value for
Yeah,
NADH.
alcohol is pretty much pure NADH, right?
That's brilliant. I'm just going to start to drink. Carry on.
NADH.
I haven't stopped.
If you have
Yeah,
too
get
much
on
of
mate.
it,
It's good for you.
if you have too much of it, the mitochondria becomes saturated with NADH, and then it slows down because it's like, man, I don't need any friggin' more fuel. I've got way too much fuel to burn. And so that means that the body will stop taking glucose and sugar and carbs into the mitochondria. So that means your blood sugar will go up. That means you get the insulin resistance and things like that. The only way you can really get NADH, because the lower you can get NADH, the more fat you'll burn, because
Right.
your body will be like, I need to start breaking down more fats to get all of this fuel in. And so the way that you kind of change that ratio is by eating less, drinking less alcohol, exercising more, intermittent fasting. It's those basic kind of things.
Of course.
So with alcohol, it's about moderation.
Yeah.
And that's I guess what I was saying. You can't follow a carnivore diet and then drink a 6-pack of beer and think you're going to lose weight. You probably will put on a crap load.
That's where you've been going wrong, Matt. Yeah.
Could be the thing that's sabotaging you.
Yeah.
What if I just use it as a marinade?
If you
For my
cook it.
smoker.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the most. Alcohol is actually one of the, because there's a couple of what you would call downfalls of ketogenic diet. Like people following ketogenic diets, but they're not losing the weight. What's the mistakes they make? Alcohol is one of the big ones.
Yep.
So you can have alcohol, but it has to be in a certain amount and certain moderation.
And I appreciate this is obviously a little bit of a diversion from the carnivore diet, but the carnivore diet naturally is high in fats as well too. Would you say that most of the time a carnivore diet is ketogenic?
Yeah, of course it would be ketogenic, because ketogenic means you produce ketones, and so you will be likely to be burning a lot of fat during
But
the process.
if your ratios aren't right, and that's the problem, right? So with
ratios?
ketogenics, in terms of fat to protein,
Oh, yeah?
because if your protein is too high, you're going into
Yeah.
gluconeogenesis. Your
Yeah.
body will then utilize glucose still as your primary source of fuel.
Instead of fat.
That's right. Now, the thing is that I like with the ketogenic diet, and again, not taking away from the carnivore diet, is the fact that I love nuts, seeds, avocado. I find those sources of fats to be very healthy for you. Moderate alcohol, I kind of tease a little bit, but on a Saturday night, if you're together with friends, absolutely, probably 2 or 3 glasses of red wine, not one.
Here, reckless abandon.
I am. But I never went into ketosis, so maybe my amazing physique and, I'm well
Are
known
you
for
based
it.
on that, on your ability to make a stick that you wee on change colour?
Shut your face, Matt. Don't run on my parade.
Because there are other factors.
I know.
Like you can get the keto breath. It can be a lot of. I don't like the people that just try to make the darkest colour on the keto sticks,
No.
because they typically just dehydrate themselves to show off.
Well, it also
Well, if
means
you're
they're not
drinking wine, you're
using it.
dehydrating as well too. So
Yeah, interesting. Hey, right. While we're talking about wine, liver, and protein
Yes.
stuff, the other. Did I interrupt something?
no, that's okay. I was just going to remind me to come back to Dave Palumbo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to know about detox, because we also, when people say, oh, we've got to clean up your system, Jeff, you've been drinking way too much wine, you're drunk, and that sort of stuff. Typically, we might want a naturopath style be going on some sort of a detox diet or something. Normal detox diets all remove meat. The first thing they do, remove meat, and they argue, oh, but it's got arachidonic acid and it's full of meaty toxins. I try to imagine why they would ever tell us to do that, because my understanding, when we have a good look at the way the liver works, there's quite a bit of amino acid involved.
That's right. You need amino acids to bind with fat-soluble toxins to get them out of your system to make them water-soluble so you can get rid of them. It's as simple as that. If you're starving amino, that's why a lot of the protein powders are often detox powders. You'll see that too. And so they add proteins in there. But what meat has specifically is sulfur-based amino acids like taurine, which makes more bile. And you've got to remember, if you look at your poo, it's brown because of the bile. So if you really want to detox your liver, you've got to get as much bile into it as possible.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
taurine's a good one. Now, humans can make taurine most of the time. Cats can't.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's one thing we've got to over
Yes.
cats.
Hey, do
Stick your
those
bones. See up
carnivore
your butt.
people start to get like really yellowy poo?
They do because of the
Because they run out of microbiome to convert the yellow bile to poo brown.
They actually do. They have different tan colour poos. That's what the guy said. But he said no. Like you got to remember. I'm all about the science. I like the studies, but in this case, there's not studies done on it. So you have to listen to people and what their experiences are. And these guys, their health improves. And so I can't really
For a period
argue
of
with
time.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
for
keep
10
thinking
years
that
at
might be
least.
a bit of a balancing act here where this will work. If you're all the way over here and crook, and we go all the way over here, you're going to get to the ideal spot somewhere, and then you're just going to go a little bit past it.
I don't know. Yeah, that's the mystery.
One of the things it'll definitely do, because that was already proven by with the ketogenic diet, is that it'll change the gut microbiome.
Oh yeah.
So it may still be very beneficial for you, but whatever diet you follow will determine what your gut microbiome would look like. And I know with ketogenic diet, they have found that certain gut species do get lost. So you do lose a bit of diversity when you follow something like a ketogenic diet, because you're not getting the fibers in.
Well, the more diverse the diet, the more diverse the microbiome.
So I'd be surprised if the same thing doesn't happen with a carnivore diet. So you are going to lose some gut species. Now, what the health impact of that is, I don't know. So we don't know yet what the health impact of that is.
Well, and I honestly don't care about all of our listeners. I'm really more interested in myself and what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to ask you guys a few questions.
Do it.
The most important thing is the perfect diet.
What?
I'm kidding. But in terms of but the one diet to rule them all, the one that makes you lean, the one that helps you to burn body fat, the one that maintains the most amount of muscle tissue while also looking after your cholesterol and making sure that you're fit, healthy. For me. I don't care about anybody else.
Oh, okay.
No, but I'm kidding. But what I'm trying to say is obviously everybody's on a quest. Well, not everybody, let's face it. A lot of people are Netflixing and eating pizza. But for people that are interested, obviously, in finding the lowest barriers to entry to achieve their results. And again, you've got to determine and start with your microbiome, because it seems to have a massive impact into obviously what works for you and what doesn't. Do you persist? Do you actually try and change your microbiome? What I was coming back to is that Dave Palumbo, what I found interesting, and when I used his diet, and it worked really, really well. It was effectively ketogenic diet, so high in fat, high in protein, but then after 14 days, I started incorporating fruit every day. So I would have a day where effectively all I'd eat would be non-refined carbohydrates, and I'd cut the fat out. I'd still consume protein, but there would be no fat during that day. So I'd be having, apples. Apples is one of my favourite, foods. I'd be having lots of fruit, lots of fresh stuff. No refined sugars, but lots of, and that obviously gave me some balance in terms of my diet and that as well too. But what is your thinking then for these sorts of people? We live in a modern society, and you're talking about making sure you've got adequate amounts of vitamins and things like that, because you can get those now through supplementation as well too, Matt.
Yeah, but that's a diet. I mean, there's dietary supplementing because your diet's inadequate in it.
But I mean, is there anything, I guess, that you would then say, well, okay, in terms of modern perfection, if you want to put it that way, is there a guide here? Is there a system
Nature's
here?
given us a decent guide over time.
We always
because
say that nature knows best.
Keeps cycling. So nature has a cycle already. And so we have seasons, we have things that disappear, and it's not a coincidence that these bugs can survive for a certain length of time, which just so happens to be the same time between seasons. So I think a lot of it's balance. If we do the same thing, what's that? Practice makes permanent, not perfect. You do the same thing every day, expecting a different result doesn't make sense. We've got to chop and change. And everything regarding muscle gain, fat loss, even everything like that, they're all adaptations to some form of stress. So I think the chopping and changing, I think, is actually quite important.
Well,
and I think moving, and if we were to have a guess as to what sort of cycle would be appropriate, I would say follow the seasons, because it seems to be the way nature is smarter,
back in the day, and I appreciate, as far as exercise science is concerned as well too, but microperiodization was one. If you keep doing the same thing, your body becomes resistant to it. You need to obviously keep adapting and keeping things moving to keep moving forward as far as.
But you've got to moderate the moderation as well, because you've got to have everything in moderation, but you still got to screw with the system. Because if you just keep everything so predictable, the body adapts to that adaptation. So you can't even just say like, oh, I'm going to be really good and then have a cheat meal every weekend. All of a sudden your body's saying, I know the pattern. We're just going to slow down the metabolism all week and then just wait for the stuff to come back. So I think it's a lot of it's chopping and changing. I don't think it'd be possible, because there's going to be individual variances and that sort of stuff, and genetic polymorphism, all that sort of different stuff. But I think closer to nature is the better.
I think Matt's onto something, because I'm going to answer your question with a weird number called 22 degrees.
Good work, Steve.
Do you want to know what that means?
Not really. I just love the fact that you said 22 degrees. So what's the meaning of life?
43.
Yes. Well, 22 degrees is the tilt of the Earth at the moment.
Oh, yeah?
And that creates the seasons.
Yeah, wow.
And, our Earth started up right, now it's like that.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
And we're 360 days in a year, not 364 point whatever it is.
365 point.
What, they've added an extra day?
There's 360.
That's why they have a leap year.
There's
It's a quarter.
365.25.
Yeah.
Days
So every
in the
4
year.
years we've got to have an extra one.
Yeah. So the Earth's on a bit of a tilt, and that gives us our seasons. And the Earth's been tilted every time we've been around. Of course, it happened about 4 billion years, 4 billion years ago.
How was it when it was straight, Steve? It must have been weird.
Well, it was just like
Did you get cold?
You would have got the seasons wouldn't change if you were back then. Oh no, you're getting bombarded with meteorites back then. It was
That's what I was
pretty
just
bad.
wondering. I mean, you were
then
there.
we copped a really big one which tilted the Earth.
It's true.
And that's created the moon. That's where the moon came from.
What? Out of the Gulf of Mexico, just bounced off or something. Or what happened there?
No,
Tell me
big
about the bloody
meteorite
moon.
smashed into the Earth, tilted the Earth, and created the moon. That's why when
Bugger off.
Neil Armstrong went to the moon, I don't know when he went the first time, but they took samples and it was the same. The date of that thing was the same as the Earth. It came from the Earth.
It's true.
Hang on. So where do all satellites then, all moons come from Jupiter and Neptune, and are they from?
An accretion disk formation.
The accretion disk, yeah.
4.54 billion years ago. Because
Exactly.
our sun,
I mean, is that give or take?
Yeah, no, that's to two significant figures. That's what it is. So what happens is the sun has exploded twice.
Don't ask any more
before.
questions. I'll tell you later.
Yeah, the sun. We're on a third generation star at the moment, right? Yeah, our star has previously exploded, went supernova, and now it's formed itself again.
What was that like,
Cool.
Steve? Would you wear
Yeah,
glasses?
it's a while ago now.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time in my life. And so that's where all the planetary matter came from. That's why we're iron rich, because that's what suns make.
His tail was at the back then.
So that's how planets were formed.
Yeah, well, what the fuck are we talking about?
No, that's the
22.
season.
Because, I've
22
taken
degrees.
to before you start that, I was curious about EPA, DHA, and arachidonic acid. I'm still stuck on, I have so many questions about biochemistry. Now I'm just thinking about this crazy old.
I'm thinking about front tails.
Yes.
You do a lot.
Anyway, we're on tilt. That's what gives us seasons. And that's why we should eat seasonally.
And that's
At
enough
22 degrees.
That's
I
enough
told you to leave
from
it
you,
at 22
Steve.
degrees, Steve.
You just sit over there and you be quiet.
God,
now.
I wanna win
I think
a
you've run out of all your smart juice.
22 degrees.
Elizma,
43.
what's your words of wisdom?
Well, okay, not as scientific as everyone else is, but I thought of it today. Like we had a podcast about the vegan diet, right? And there was pros and cons with the vegan diet.
Sure.
Today we talk about the carnivore diet, and there's pros and cons with the carnivore diet.
So who's right and who's wrong?
Well, that's the thing. We're omnivores, right? So maybe it's a little bit of both.
You got a book coming out called The Omnivore Diet by any chance?
I don't know, but
Do
it just
it.
makes
Seriously,
sense.
do
It's
it.
like
It's next.
Yeah, I probably should. And I should have done it before we get on the podcast so I could sell it, but
Yes, that's
too
right.
late now.
Yeah.
So then we should have called our vegan podcast The Herbivore Diet. And then we
Yeah.
should have done Carnivore Diet, so that way it made our Omnivore Diet make sense.
Exactly.
Do you want to know from an anatomical point of view how we're different to herbivores?
No, because Elizma was still talking about her omnivore theory.
Go for it.
Oh, that was pretty much
Nah, I
it. It
just
was
want to
just-
make him feel bad. Did you see his face? He's
No,
just
I
like,
thought
oh
you might
shit,
hate
sorry.
interrupting.
No, you can't offend Steve. It's
He's an
impossible.
arse.
Yeah.
Speaking of asses, have you heard of the cecum, which is down that way?
Harry
You know what?
Seacom?
You're seeking. What are you seeking, Steve?
Have you got a Harry Seacom? He's an opera singer.
I said on my
He's an
Great
opera singer,
old
also
song.
one of the Goonies.
Oh,
So
see,
awesome.
I thought
That's the
I
funniest.
sit on my hairy seeker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was part of the Goon Squad.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, great singer.
Oh, good work, Steve.
It's also
He was
a
also
place-
an Oliver.
Yeah.
You want some more?
Was that Harry Seacom?
Yeah, it was. He was.
He
He was
was.
an
It was
Oliver.
porridge.
Awesome actor.
No.
It's not, do you want some more? It's like, can I have some more, sir?
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and it
he
tastes
went,
great, but it's
"More."
no here you make porridge. No, that was an advert from the 80s.
Aye, it's delicious. Well, that's not how
Here
you make porridge.
Yeah, that's the dart. They
That's
always
it.
think it's the dart.
Not the dot. G-O-G-G-O.
We're really showing our age, Matt.
And the fact that we used to watch too much TV.
Way too much
that was
TV.
a funny
Aye,
advert.
it's
Don't you
delicious.
red pen that.
Aye, it's delicious.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, you were saying you were talking about Harry's
Oh, yeah, you were
Harry's
talking
Harry
about
Seacom.
his-
You're talking about Harry
talking about the
Seacom.
Seacom.
Tell us about your Seacom,
The
Steve.
cecum is, I haven't got one anymore that's functional. But
What?
vegetarians
What the
do.
hell?
He had it sewed
What?
up.
What? Stop.
He does
What?
stop.
The cecum is the bit where near the appendix, right? Our appendix is
Yeah.
shriveled up cecum, right? And cecums are larger in vegetarians than they are in omnivores or carnivores.
Oh, did you have your cecum removed?
No, my cecum's still intact. It's called an appendix.
If
But
you
can
can't
have
find it,
removed.
you got to Seacom.
I had mine removed.
But if you remove the cecum of a sheep, dies. Or
So-
a cow, dies.
So yeah, I had mine removed. I had my cecum out.
And yet you're still
You had yours
alive.
bleached. It wasn't removed.
Completely removed. They went in twice. Yeah.
So Jeff attested to the theory of cecums, and said it's only a little tiny thing at the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah, hey, I've heard nothing about that. Don't you let people know, Steve. I've got a reputation around here. Yeah, it was big. I mean, like, they were like, oh my gosh, that thing is huge.
The cecum.
Yeah.
Bear with Wide Canyon.
So now the parts of our intestine that are for cellulose, for digesting cellulose, is about 18%, compared to a sheep's about 80%.
Wow.
So we differ largely. We only have one stomach too, by the way.
That's why I benefit on a ketogenic diet, because I
Hang on,
shouldn't.
so why are we talking about sheep?
Because sheep are vegans.
Are vegans.
Yeah,
Herbivores.
Apart from herbivores, you should say.
Herbivores. We don't say they haven't read a book.
And
They're
so
herbivores.
horses and cattle and those sort of things, and they have a larger cecum. And they're about 80% of their intestines due for digesting cellulose. We can't digest cellulose. Neither can dog, neither can cat.
Yeah. Next time I look at a sheep in the paddock, I'm going to have cecum envy.
Yes, it's a big thing. Pigs have 48%, and chimpanzees 60%. So even they can digest a bit of cellulose. We can't. We're shit at it.
Yeah, I think the
Can't make vitamin C
only
with
thing we
shit.
really do is we break it down with our teeth, don't we? It's that through chewing you can break down the cellular cell walls, but that's pretty much it.
You can't digest it.
No.
So does
So
our
what makes
appendix do
cellulase?
much?
Sorry?
Does our appendix do much?
Microbiome.
Well, that's a really good question. It's supposed to be a storage for
I think
microbiome,
cellulose is an
but
enzyme.
we know that when it's removed from people, there are no ill effects.
Yeah.
What?
I wish I had mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like it's still an unknown, but we know that their life expectancy is still the same.
Very
Well,
good.
it's
like a
really
little
confusing
nursery
because
too.
when I went to hospital,
microbiome.
they said, look, you're going to have an appendectomy. And I said, oh, is that where you give me a second willy? And they said, no, that's an addictomy. You should have one of those, Matt. You feel more like a man.
I put it on my knee. I'm fucking so bored in meetings. Add a dictomy to my knee. And I just play with it, Jeremy. And a boob on the other one.
It's a good idea. He's full of ideas.
Anyway,
So
Now-
what were you saying in terms of then, as far as the perfect diet? You were going to tell everybody.
Oh yeah, I just not the perfect diet, but there's obviously pros with vegetables and plant-based foods, and there's pros with meat-based foods. Like one of the things that you will kind of like lack, apart from the nutrients that we talked about with the carnivore diet, is also polyphenols. So polyphenols is what you get from your colorful fruits and vegetables and things like that. We know that polyphenols play a role in the gut, where it kind of like can help maintain healthy ratios of gut bacteria. So you're obviously not going to get that from a carnivore diet. You'll get that more from a vegan-based diet. Ideally, I know there was a research paper I read a few years ago. It was based on genetic expression. So they purely looked at genetic expression of what foods do in terms of switching off disease-causing genes and switching on longevity genes. And these scientists came up with the so-called perfect diet, and they said, look, it's pretty much a third protein, a third fat, and a third carbs, something along those lines. And in terms of a genetic expression point of view, they said was the ideal diet. They didn't go into like what types of protein and fats and carbs.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, I mean, are we talking obviously sugar, or are we talking just like natural?
Mm.
In my, it should be low GI, right? So low GI carbohydrates, which would include
high fiber, high protein, and high fat.
fiber
Because you
type
lower
stuff.
the GI with fiber, fat, and protein.
Yeah.
But sure, but then again, you look at somebody who's obviously just lifted a ton of weight, and the most anabolic compound that they can possibly have is insulin. And if you're having a high GI meal with protein after that, then all of that's going to be sucked into the glycogen and actually help with recovery, repair. So, you know what I mean? It's situationally dependent.
It is definitely situational. It
Definitely.
depends, like, do I just want to have a genetically healthy diet? Do I want to lose weight? Do I want to build?
Exactly.
So
Exactly
that's
right.
why there's not one specific diet for everyone. And you may actually change the food you eat depending on what situation you're in at this point in time. It's one of the things I always tell my partner. It's not about the food you eat. It's about the timing of the food that you eat. So I think people get caught up with calories and all this other rubbish, which doesn't really have anything to do with weight loss and longevity. It's really like, depending on what your goal is, depending on what you want to do, then you have to change the timing and the type of food that you eat to get to that goal. And that's unfortunately very independent. It's not an easy answer for that. But it's like you said, Jeff, like if you are very skinny and you want to build muscle
I
and
am.
you put it in
I
your
do.
you want to build weight, then you want to have that insulin release.
Yes.
But if you want to lose weight, you don't want to have the insulin release.
That's right.
So that's gonna be different
man.
needs for different people.
And the problem is, as things change, the information changes too, because it's really hard to identify what's the causative factor in a human body where it's this multiple things going on at once. Everything's correlations, not causation, because once you remove something, everything behaves differently. Like if you have a look at oils alone, like remember we talked before about eliminating meats in autoimmune and inflammatory things, because there was the theory that arachidonic acid is going to be driving that inflammatory process. Well, because Jeff's skinny and he wants to get bigger, there is a strategy where you can use the arachidonic acid to enhance the inflammation and enhance the muscle regeneration and repair in response to that. William Llewellyn has had a very interesting journey in his career, because he came out years ago promoting arachidonic acid as something that will enhance growth for people that hit a plateau. And with bodybuilders, they were typically avoiding a lot of grains and that sort of stuff. They typically had a high omega-3 diet and low omega-6. Especially if they went on to the grass-fed meats, they avoid grains. And then what happens is if you hit a plateau and you're not getting the soreness from the training, they can supplement with the arachidonic acid, and all of a sudden they get enhanced growth again of their muscle. They can kick back in a new growth phase. But then he continued the research because he kept getting criticised from people saying
Matt,
it's inflammatory and oxidative stress and all that sort of stuff. Most recently, he just presented at the ISSN conference where his competitors, the people that were trying to shut him down, eventually have come out and published paper agreeing with what he's saying, that in a different situation, arachidonic acid can kind of trigger this reaction that creates an increased antioxidant defense, an anti-inflammatory reaction in response.
Like Trish Light.
Yeah.
When I was actually selling his product, when Matt and I very first met back
the
in
molecular
2010.
nutrition.
And
Aracin or something.
Yeah, and Matt's like, I really don't get this, arachidonic acid. And then you're saying this doesn't make sense to me. And that's the thing. Then you met.
So then I went to America to meet with him and had a good chat.
And this is the beautiful thing about actually having a difference of opinion, but not being married to it so much until you actually seek an expression and a conversation, which, obviously, Matt, you guys
we should get him on. He's keen for the podcast, and he can talk all about arachidonic acid and that, because I'll tell you what's interesting, and this is something else that we kind of get our heads caught up with, but, the grass-fed, grain-fed thing, it all started out with this omega-6 to omega-3 ratios within the fat. And as we know, so omega-6 can go down arachidonic acid and be inflammatory, and omega-3 ultimately creates EPA DHA, which makes us smart as a beached whale. So that was an interesting theory. And a lot of people, there's a lot of data saying if you predominantly eat these meat-based diets, you're deficient in EPA DHA. To me, that doesn't make sense because it's weird, because meat's supposed to be full of omega-3. And in fact, a grazing grass-fed animal, I think, is a 2 or 4 to 1 of a omega-6 to omega-3, and only on a grain feed lot will it blow out to about 30 to 1 sort of thing, which creates marbling of the meat and all that sort of stuff. So that's why we kind of want grass-fed, so we can get the omega-3.
So with these sorts of diets as well too, effectively, whether you're vegan, whether you're keto, whether you're paleo, whether you're following a carnivore diet, there's ways to be able to educate yourselves on that, along with your training, tweak your nutrition and your supplementation to get the most out of it. Effectively, that's what we're saying. There is no one size fits all. No. All of these things can be beneficial, but you have to educate and understand that one size doesn't fit all. Just because you do it doesn't mean because of, as Matt said, my polymorphisms, my microbiome, my environment, my training, my stress levels. I mean, there's so many variables, which is why you can't say, well, you've done it, so therefore I'm just going to do exactly what you do and expect to get the same results. It's the same thing with anything, and this is where education information comes in. This is why I like the theranostics. This is why I actually like testing, looking into the bloods, looking into the
treat people, not diseases.
I mean, the Dutch test. I mean, some of the testings that you can do.
Organic acid
testing.
That's something I do a lot with people. It's very interesting when people follow different diets and you do an organic acid test. So these are not necessarily sick people, but people interested in performance enhancing. And it's very interesting to see how different diets change their results.
Can I ask you something? Because when you do the organic acid test, which I've given up saying oat, because I can't do it test.
It's like
so when you do the organic acid
machine,
they have they tell you to eat a certain diet for the few days before it. So what do you do? I mean, you can use the organic acid test to kind of do it that way. Tell them to eat a certain thing to see what comes out. the other side.
There's certain foods that they kind of recommend, for instance, like the apples and the cherries and stuff. It's just because they do contain arabinose.
Yeah.
And arabinose is one of the candida markers on the test. So if you're going to eat a whole bunch of apples, your arabinose will be sky high, and the practitioner will think, oh my God, you've got candida overgrowth deluxe. But it's because the person ate a lot of apples. So that's why you eliminate some of those foods.
Yeah.
However, anything else, I always tell people just eat like you always do. Do what you normally do.
What about supplementation? Do you also tell them to stop supplements? Or depends what you want to do, huh? You're trying to see how is this person responding to their current diet and supplementation. You would leave them on everything, wouldn't you?
Well, what I do is if they're taking any herbs, like I think echinacea and the reishi mushroom, maybe two herbs that can influence some of the test results. So I'll kind of avoid herbal supplements for about a week before they do a test.
Yeah.
But if they're taking B vitamins or any other kind of nutritional stuff and they've been doing it for a long time,
You wanna know.
I actually want them to keep taking it because I want to see if those supplements are actually working.
Yeah, right.
But I don't start them on anything new until they have a test result. But I want them to do everything that they have been doing for the last couple of months as much as possible to kind of get an idea, well, what's working, what's not working, what's still going on, what do we need to fix.
There's another thing that I just want to discuss quickly. I know we're running out of time, but this thing bugs me a bit. When we talked about the herbivore diet and the vegan stuff, I had my weird theory about the insects. And my argument was that I don't believe there is an actual herbivore animal on the face of the earth because they all will accidentally eat insects and everything like that. And it may not be accidental, but they contain extremely important nutrients that is not found in the plants. We've talked about there's certain things that as part of a carnivore diet that you can't get. I think potentially, what about in nature? So a carnivore, they're kind of eating animals whole, aren't they? I mean, they're eating the outsides, they're eating the insides, they'd eat the organs, they'd probably eat, they wouldn't be squeezing the poop out of the intestinal tract or something. Maybe they're eating the fibre. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, in nature, is it possible to be exclusively carnivore without getting the herbivore's intestinal contents or something? I'm trying to work out if there's a way that it's balanced in nature.
Well, some of the lions don't. They leave some of their kill for hyenas, and they become obligatory carnivores. But the lions usually just kill and eat the animal, and often don't eat the whole animal because they kill a wildebeest or something. They don't pick it clean.
Do they eat the guts?
I don't know
Are they getting
about
the intestinal tract?
I don't think that lions necessarily eat the organs. It's more the hyenas and the scavengers that eat the organs.
Do they eat poo?
No, the only animals that eat poo is like what we talked about last time. It's the herbivores. It was the elephants
and my dog
and my pet rabbit.
No, my dog will eat poo.
Bunty.
But they were more the animals. Yeah, that you. Plant eaters who eat the poos and stuff.
He got eaten by a greyhound.
I don't know why I laughed. That was really bad. Sorry, buddy.
That was very tragic, actually. It's a little white rabbit with
really bad.
Pink eyes.
It happened to me once before when someone said that something happened to their cat, and I just got the giggles. I'm not a bad person.
Yeah, you are.
It's just that I find those things
Bunty
funny.
was a family pet. He had pink eyes. He was my sister rescued him from a laboratory, brought him home in a little hutch. Well, no, he dug his way out from the hutch and got across to the park across the road, and somebody let their greyhound loose on him. Come over and just found the white fluff everywhere.
Oh, that's a horrible story. You shouldn't be laughing at that.
I didn't say it was a nice story. It was actually painful.
Yeah. I didn't mean to laugh, honestly. Now it's just awkward laughing.
Yeah. Bastard.
Poor thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks, man.
Anywho.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I care.
Yeah.
I like animals.
Yeah.
I've just got the best looking animal out of everyone here, though.
No, is that what you call it?
Flat face.
Oh, flat face. Oh. Thought you were talking about your wife.
Yeah, she's pretty good looking too.
She is. Okay.
So, do carnivores eat poo? Was my question.
Some
before
do.
we got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but only like the hyenas,
And my
if you
dog,
call them
hyenas, yeah.
carnivore. I just look. My knowledge on this is not that great, but I've just seen David Attenborough going out in the African.
What is a lion's poo? You're from Africa. What's a lion's poo look like?
Big.
Does it though?
I don't know.
Because
it's
there's
definitely
no
not
fibre.
the long fibrous logs kind of thing, I'd assume it's
Like a cat poo.
You're from
Like
South Africa,
round
you
and-
should know.
I don't study lion poo. You know, it's not like
Oh, sure.
I run away from the
I just
lion.
assumed everyone in Africa would be
No. We run away from
I
animals.
didn't
We don't
think
go
you'd
and
run away
study.
from a
There's
lion.
only
They'd kill you,
20,000
wouldn't
lions left, I think.
Well, as long as you're faster runner than the guy behind you, you're
That's
okay.
it. Run away from
Yeah.
your friend.
It's
is
like,
what
like
you're
the
saying.
Australian
Yes.
saying you don't have to
Yeah,
outswim
South
a
Africans
shark.
don't have friends.
No, because they all got eaten by lions.
Yeah.
Especially if you're Elizma. She's a genuinely fast runner and endurance.
Yeah, but yeah.
So
What?
yeah, I'd run the lion.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I'm curious about the poo because I still can. My one question that didn't get answered. So I'm
That's
pretty.
what they call Matt
so
the
I worked
scat
out
man.
vitamin C. We worked out that so you get vitamin C from the liver. What about blood? You can drink a bit of blood. Would you get all that sort of stuff from there?
African massage do, don't they? Do you know about that?
No.
Oh,
You're very racist. Why do you keep going back to Elizma?
She's from
as
South
if
Africa.
She's an African here.
Yeah, well, what they do is they get a little bow and arrow, and they don't pull all the way back, but a little way back, and spear the I don't know what it is, the carotid artery of the animal, and drink the blood.
Anyway, what were we talking about this stuff for?
It's going a bit crazy.
So vitamin C you're going to get from your liver. I don't know about anything you get from the blood much.
The animals are
Calcium and
Slap
bones.
them around a little bit.
So vitamin C, we've worked out liver.
Yep.
I keep repeating myself. Sorry. Calcium, that sort of stuff we're going to get if you eat the bones or bone broths and that sort of thing. The folate.
So the folate, if you eat eggs,
Eggs.
then you'll get folate from eggs.
Eggs.
liver's
and
liver's
liver.
extremely
Liver.
high. It's about 800
B12. Heaps of B12 all through me.
folate is about 800 milligrams or micrograms, I should say, per 100 grams. So it's an extremely high folate food.
So the fats, you're going to get a lot of fats. You want, and there's no problem having a certain amount of naturally containing arachidonic acid, but we want to try to go for the grass-fed sort of meats. Don't worry about your collagen supplements, but your grass-fed meat to try to get your fats and everything right. What else did we cover? That's pretty much it. We're not going to have any shortage of bloody protein.
No.
Our body's going to use some of that protein to make our sugars.
Yep.
What am I missing?
Well, the only thing that I want to emphasize is what you both have kind of said is like, you know, how you can get a lot of these nutrients from a variety of meat sources. If you're just going to eat steak, if you think a carnivore diet is just about eating steak and T-bone, then you're going to miss out on some of these nutrient sources.
What do you need
like
to eat?
The folate and the
You need to eat the organs. You need to eat
Yeah,
the
you
big
need
ro-
to
it's
eat
noticed
kidneys, steak and
the
kidneys.
sardines,
What did you say?
the bones, and
Tongue to
stuff.
tail, nose to
Nose to
tail.
tail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
try to get as much as you can. Follow some people like Ben Greenfield and
He
that
does.
too, because he talks a lot of. He does a lot of hunting, and he does the whole lot. He probably even has some recipes and that sort of stuff. You actually inspired him to make haggis.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
I'm coming over, Ben.
yeah, lucky you didn't inspire him with your spotted dick, which is also a Scottish dessert. Now, that's pretty much covered most of my questions. The only one that was left, and if you don't mind, because you did mention the polyphenols, and my theory with the polyphenols was a lot to do with the microbiome and how to create a solution to the issues associated with TMAO. So I'm always, remember, we're back to our herbivore vegan podcast and all that game changer stuff where they talked about meat is evil because of TMAO. If we're eating meat, then we're basically eating TMAO. And if we're not eating polyphenols to regulate our microbiome, why aren't they all dead?
Well, these guys talked about TMAO.
point.
This guy, and basically he found that the TMAO is high in deep sea fish, as we know.
Yeah.
And yet
They
we
smell
know
fishy.
that people that eat a lot of fish have quite healthy lives.
Yeah.
So people who consume a lot of it, so he argues that TMAO may be just like a correlation, not a causation thing.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe, because if you're eating a lot of deep sea fish,
Yeah.
it's known to be good for you. And why is it? Because you're only picking on one of the chemicals.
But I have
in
to
it.
say, Steve, it's the same thing. In my understanding with cholesterol, for example, and I wonder if we can extrapolate this argument out to the TMAO, is that just because you eat it doesn't mean that you have it. And in fact, if you do eat it, your body actually might be able to use it as a way for your body to stop making it and having an issue with it. Is it the same with the TMO? If you eat it, it's actually beneficial.
Could be. What we do know is that deep sea fish that have loads of it, it doesn't seem to have any detrimental effects. In fact, have positive effects.
The best for the heart disease. Everyone says eat a high vegetable, high fish diet seems to be the...
And I'm not going to speculate here, but maybe the microbiome that makes the TMAO normally is not present in a carnivore diet.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because it is generated by a certain microbiome. And this
Clostridium.
conversion, it comes from carnitine and choline conversion. Sometimes that happens in the animal, which is why fish smell fishy.
Yep.
But the rest of the time it can happen in the gut.
But yeah, and again, it's consistently all the time is that there's just so many agendas going on here and all the rest of it. You've really got to look at what are they trying to sell you? What are they trying to push? What is the agenda? Is it truthful science? I mean, is it science for science sake, or is there actually an agenda behind it? And again, maybe there's some good truths in there with so much.
And one of the other positives that he talks about, we were talking about Shawnee, is there's no lectins, there's no goitrogens, there's no carcinogenic glycosides, there's no phytic acid, no protease inhibitors, and no saponins.
But typically, where are they coming from? Where are most of those compounds coming from that you just mentioned there? Yeah, but what plant foods?
Oh, loads of them. I mean, even oxalates come from almonds.
Well, lectins is
they're-
mainly grains.
Yeah, they're in all sorts. So he just says you don't have any of those in this diet, which is a point, and he's right. But can the human body, cope with these? And some of us can, some of us can't. So again, it comes back to one diet doesn't fit all. But you certainly don't have any of those sort of
Tell
things.
you what, I reckon I'll be happy to eat meat all the time, and then when the lychees and stuff come out, just go stupid, eating lychees and mangoes and mulberries for part of a year, and the rest of the time I'll just eat nothing but meat. That could work.
The other positive,
Let's do an experiment.
Yeah, I reckon. The other positive about this diet, and before we get into too many negatives, is it's the simplest diet I think you could follow. What is it? Is it animal? Eat it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, other diets are like, ketogenic, was it, and so that's got to be a positive for people who, find diets complex. And that's what he says is quite simple. So you can eat as much as you want, don't count calories, don't weigh anything. But I do like the fact that we should be able to have some sort of plant foods if you want the best sort of diet. It's something that's known to be able to be berries and those sorts of things. Don't see a problem with that.
All right, you got to get your shit together. Like, seriously, when I start even a keto diet, that's the first thing that happens. It's like, and in my clinical experience, it's like your keto diet, most of the times you can do it unless they get crook in the guts. And the moment their gut shut down, nothing works.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that's got me wigged out with this whole thing, is I just can't understand how they poop. And you said they poop less, and I thought that was a
Vastly
flash
less,
way of
he said.
saying
Did we
constipation.
say once a week or something?
He says
Twice.
once or twice a week he poops. And he says there's no problem. His digestive issues are all cleared up. Because remember, a lot of bad digestion is due to bad fermentations of carbohydrates. So, it just worked for him. So, and we know in the studies inflammation goes down. So that's another important thing. So if you're achy and arthritic and that's really contaminating your life, eating like this definitely reduces inflammation. So because it reduces the microbiome, reduces the lipopolysaccharides.
I mean, I've got to say, for me personally, it's not a diet I'm likely to follow.
No.
I mean, just simply because I find that a bit restrictive, but I'm not far off that when I do eat keto, which I do from time to time.
Do. Well, you don't do when you go carnivore.
No, but I do when I do keto. So
it's interesting though, reading his thoughts, very interesting.
I wish
stuff.
that there was still dodos. I'd go keto on dodos and
Doo-doo. What about if you ate dodos doo-doos?
No, but I wonder what a doo-doo would look like from a dodo. I wonder if it would be gamey.
I'm not game to even look at it. Anyway, let's
get
do something else and finish this podcast.
Yes. Okay.
How do we do that? You're the adult here today.
All right.
I usually just waffle a whole heap of shit.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, lots of food for thought.
well done, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, not one size fits all, and I think that's what we've already stated. There could be some aspects of this diet that you might want to look at, consider. Certainly, looking at what's not in the diet to determine some of the health benefits that have come out of this diet. Even things like this, you might try for a period of time. As I said, with Dave Palumbo, who we met over in Las Vegas, really intelligent guy. Even with the ketogenic-based diet, he would cycle it even within when you're doing it to incorporate fibers and other things like that. That seemed to work for him, as far and his athletes as well too, and people that he had recommend that diet. And I followed his advice, and it worked wonderfully for me. So one size doesn't fit all, but there's something that you can learn from everybody. Being closed-minded to new concepts and ideas, you can actually miss out on some really amazing stuff. And as I said, even if you don't accept the whole diet, there might be parts of it where you can go, you know what, I can incorporate more meals and or more food like that. So,
and if we happen to have an ice age anytime soon, you can feel confident that we're okay to live on this carnivore diet for a period of time without having to make fake meat out of a lab.
Well, I think I'd rather eat that than meat made out of a lab. But,
Yes,
call me strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, strange. Wrap it up.
All right. Thanks, guys.
No worries.
And we'll be back next week when you'll hear Steve say...
Goodness me, you threw me on the spot then. What'll I say next week?
Well, you've got to say that now. Well done.
Done.
Write that down.
But anyway, thanks guys for joining us, and we'll be back next week with some more. Thanks, Steve.
All right,
Elizma,
nice.
Matt.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
Joffrey. Stop. How can we never do an intro without Brooke giggling in the background? She just fucking loses it at the intro phase.
She's put the hot coffee down before she cries.
I suddenly felt like vomiting. Are we good? All right.
He was creepy.
God.
It's misdirection, man. It's disgusting.
Exactly. I don't know what he's talking about anymore.
Anyway,
But how do you say shear?
I don't.
Share.
I don't share them at all.
He doesn't share sheep. Not
Shear?
with anyone.
Oh,
I'm not sharing my sheep with anyone. Anyway, all right. Let's do a podcast on carnivores.
Carnivores.